Okay, everyone. In my last video, I talked about how to fight against multiple opponents. Now I'm going to focus on teamwork against a single opponent. Now, in LARPs, you see this a lot because oftentimes a single opponent that comes out, particularly NPCs, will be substantially stronger than a single fighter or even two fighters together and maybe even three fighters together, okay? And if that's the case, then engaging them one at a time is a recipe for disaster because they'll eliminate you one at a time. And so what we need to work on is coordinating our technique for fighting against a single opponent as a team. Now, we're going to start with just two people. So this is the enemy and these are our allies. The first thing to think about is, what do they bring to the battle, okay? If this is a sword and shield fighter, okay, and this is a polearm fighter, then the relative distance between the enemy and the ally is not going to be the same, okay? A polearm fighter should not be fighting up close and personal the way a sword and shield fighter will, okay? Instead, it will look a little more like this, okay, because of the maximum reach that the polearm will have. Now, in case no one's ever told you this, something to remember is if you're a great weapon fighter and you're fighting with a sword and shieldman, okay, fight on the side of the shield away from their weapon, okay? So I'm right-handed, I fight with my shield in my left hand. So that means if I've got somebody with a great weapon, I want them on my left, okay? And I'm going to be to their right. That's because my shield is now able to provide cover for both of us. The opposite would be true if I was left-handed. If I'm left-handed, I'm holding the shield in my right hand, and I want the great weapon to be to my right, and I'll be to their left for the same reason. But the idea here is the polearmsman has a much greater reach than I do as a sword and shield fighter, okay? Now, let's say that we're dealing with a polearmsman here. Now, we're dealing with somebody with a rifle, okay? Now, we can make a much greater distance here. In fact, what you might end up doing in this scenario, you've got sword and shield and you've got a rifle. You might not even move into distance against this opponent. You might try to maintain an out of distance status so that the sword and shieldman is here for defense and offense if he moves into distance, but meanwhile, you've got your ranged fighter that is pelting away at them, okay? So the point is, when you're looking at how you're going to approach your opponent here as a team, it's not one size fits all. You need to adapt your tactic to what you're bringing to the battlefield. All right, now, for the purposes of the remainder of this discussion, we're going to assume that both of our opponents have, or both of our allies have exactly the same weapons. Let's assume they both have polearms for the sake of our discussion, okay? That means that it's not advantageous to have one of our allies closer than the other at any given time. Rather, you want to maintain roughly the same distance, and that's going to be maximum range for the great weapon, just like it would be with sword and shield. You want to, unless there's a reason why it's more advantageous to be close on this enemy, you're going to want to fight at your maximum distance so that you can hit them, but you also have the opportunity to move and break distance if necessary, okay? Now, as we talked about in our last video, if this individual is fighting two opponents, they're going to try to move and create a one-on-one fight. Your job as allied fighters is to ensure that that never happens. And the way you do that is, and this is so much easier to say than do. If the opponent moves towards one of our fighters, this fighter has to be smart enough to give ground. And this fighter has to move slightly forward to, again, maintain that same distance. And so what you end up with here is almost a gravity model or some kind of astrophysics problem where this object is rotating and these objects are going to be rotating relative to them at all times. So our opponent moves and our fighters react, okay? And they're trying to maintain the same distance at all time. Sometimes that means that one fighter will retreat and the other one will stay static. Sometimes it means that one fighter will advance while their ally remains static, okay? The idea here is it's all keyed off what your opponent is doing, okay? If your opponent moves, you react. The other thing is these two should be talking to each other the whole time, okay? If your opponent moves, he should be saying, I'm gonna step back. Or this ally should be saying, take a step back, I'm gonna move forward, okay? Communicate, let them know what you're doing. Let your ally know what you're doing. Hey, I'm gonna move forward. Hey, take a step back. If the opponent moves forward and you see your ally is not reacting, tell them, hey, take a step back, you're getting too close, you're getting too close to this guy, all right? That kind of chatter should happen constantly. Frankly, it'll happen all the time until these two have fought together so often that they already automatically know how to adapt to this fight, okay? But if you don't have that kind of experience, then you're gonna have to talk to each other about it. You don't scream, you don't yell, but you talk to each other, okay? Now, I'm gonna add in a third ally because I wanna talk about a last point that's critical, okay? You are all working together and you're all dependent upon each other for your safety and your success. So, your opponent does something that damages this ally, okay? So what do we need to have to happen here in order for this fight to end successfully? Well, the first thing is, if this ally takes a lot of damage and then just flees, they've done nothing beneficial for the fight, okay? It's understandable that they want to withdraw and they want to protect themselves. And sometimes there's going to be effects in game that require you to do that, and that's understandable. But if you take a high amount of damage or some kind of crippling effect and just flee and leave your allies, especially if you're the center person, now you see how far, this person leaves, you see how far they are apart, and suddenly it becomes a one-on-one fight, okay? If you take a bad injury, communicate that. Say, hey, I need to step back. I need to break. I can't take this much damage. And your allies can close up to provide you with more support or even allow you to withdraw and close the fight into a 2-on-2. But so many times I've been in a scenario where you're fighting next to someone and they take an injury, they take damage, they take some kind of effect, and they immediately flee the area and they leave you hanging, okay? That's not beneficial to anybody. And this is not somebody that I'm ever going to trust in battle again, okay? Because they left me hanging, all right? If you're in a melee scenario, which happens sometimes, and there's a big scrum going on, okay? A lot of times what's beneficial is if you're a 3-man team, you have 2 people up front, generally the fighters, right? Maybe a sword and shield or a polearm or 2 swords and shield, right? And then the third person, if it's a caster, if it's a distance fighter like a rifleman or an archer or a thief or anybody who's not a frontline fighter, put him behind you. And this person's job is to keep an eye out for anything that's happening behind you and warn you. Now, this person's job is extremely critical and extremely important, and it's extremely important that they do it correctly, because if you're engaged with a big bad up here and this person doesn't warn you that their support is coming in, it can easily result in a team kill, okay? And what's extremely important for this person to remember is that they should not be looking towards the fight. They should be looking out here at all times. They can glance back to see how the fight's going to make sure they're not running into anybody, but they should always be looking where the fight isn't and checking out the flanks to make sure that they're clear. So remember, if you're this person, if you're the lookout, you should not be staring at the fight. You don't look in the same direction that 2 other people are already looking. You're not giving any benefit to that. Instead, check out the backfield and warn your allies if support is coming in, okay? Likewise, This person is there. If one of them gets dropped, this person can help evac them and they can do a fighting retreat. Okay? So, again, we're going to practice these. We're going to practice working in groups and teams against a single opponent. And it takes a lot of training to coordinate and get used to this. And unless you're used to kind of the stress of intense melee combat, it frankly it's daunting. And the first couple times you'll make mistakes, but the important thing is you'll learn from them, okay? So that's the theory. We will practice that. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks.